The Consulting Success podcast is powered by the Clarity Coaching Program. If you'd like to work directly with the Consulting Success team and receive personal coaching and support to optimize and grow your consulting business, marketing, and revenue, visit consultingsuccess.com to find out more and apply.
Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. Michael Zapersky here, and today I'm very excited to have Kay Formanek joining us. Kay, welcome.
Wonderful to be here. Thank you very much, Michael.
Yes, okay. So for those that aren't familiar with you and your work, you are an advisor, an author, a coach, a speaker on the transformational power of diversity to organizations and society. You're the founder and CEO of K Diversity and Performance, where you help your clients unleash more creativity, more growth, and more engagement. And we're going to talk about how you got to where you are, lessons learned along the way. But I want to start off with your time at Accenture. You spent over 2 decades working there from what I see. And I'd love to know, did you find the transition of going from working at Accenture to starting your own consulting business to be an easy one? Or was it challenging? Just given the experience you had working at such a large established consulting organization, global organization, what was that transition like for you as you started your own business?
So I think there were some benefits and challenges. The benefits are that you come from an organization with a formidable brand. And when I was in Accenture, I think it was always Accenture and then myself in service of Accenture and organizations. And then you move and you start founding an organization with no name, no traction. And suddenly you think, my goodness, I don't have this brand. And yet, what is very interesting is that certainly I had spent 25 years at Accenture. What I found is that the branding of Accenture sort of extended because people assumed that you knew your stuff, you had a good background. But what you could then do is really create something that you wanted to do, drawing on some of the capabilities. And I think what is very important is that with Accenture, you have large teams, you could flex the organization. And so what I really needed to do as I founded Diversity and Performance was to find an operating model. I didn't want to be big. I didn't want to certainly be a 600,000 person organization, right. But I did want to be able to flex. And so that was a challenge.
And when you made that transition, is there anything that you took from those years at Accenture in terms of systems, processes, best practices that you found you were able to apply and see benefit rather quickly in your own consulting business?
Accenture always had the brand performance delivered. And certainly when I was in Accenture, there was a sense of we're not a strategy consulting. We don't create written reports that are put in drawers. We really prided ourselves that we looked at the whole value chain in terms of strategy and the consulting and the outsourcing, etc. What you also have to do in Accenture is really make complex things simple. And those were some of the skills that I think I brought into my organization. I didn't want to talk about the strategy of diversity alone. I really wanted to create what is the methodology, the implementation. So that was quite helpful.
So 2016, you decided to make the leap and start your own business. How long before that were you thinking about, leaving Accenture and starting your own business? Was it something that was on your mind for many years? Was it an event? Like what? Just kind of take me back into that time. What was going on, and how long were you considering or thinking about making that transition?
Well, it's a very interesting question, and it's something that I really relate to other organizations. What occurs is when you leave an organization, it is usually the culmination of many moments and many reflections, and then an event. And often when organizations come to me and say, oh, this high-powered, very important woman leader is leaving, convince her to stay. And I say, probably that's going to be impossible because of the sense that it's been built up over time. In my sense, I had the benefit of traveling the world, doing amazing things. But what I started finding is that what really gave me the joy was focusing specifically on the domain of diversity, performance, equity. And I wanted to do that 100% of my time. And at the time, at least with an Accenture, it was more on the side in terms of my role versus a primary focus.
Right. I think that's such a great point that, so often, you'll hear in the media or you'll just somehow learn about somebody's path, and you very often focus on that one event, like, there was downsizing or they got fired or there was an acquisition, but the actual planning process or the thought process has typically been happening for a while, even before that one event. So I think that's a really great point. So when you kind of made that decision, did you consider going and doing more of this diversity inclusion work, maybe at another firm? Like, why go off and start your own thing as opposed to finding some other consulting firm or other organization that's specialized, or at least that maybe would create a kind of a D&I area that you could lead?
What I wanted to do when I left Accenture, I suppose, was really have the space to do what I wanted to do in a very agile way, in a very purpose-driven way. And what I found when I left Accenture is I actually needed to take some space. What I ended actually up doing, and this was not with my planning, but I did a master's in authentic learning and leadership. And that was exactly the period that I needed to almost rewire myself, to reflect, talk about what I wanted to do. And the other thing, and it's really a hint that I give many people that I coach, as I transitioned out of Accenture, did two things. The one is I worked with a design agency to develop a logo. And it seems like a small thing, but in a logo, all the dreams and the hopes and the meaning of what's behind an organization really helps you be very concrete. And the second thing I did was design my website. And at the time of designing my website, I put 5 things that I would be doing within diversity and performance, many things that I hadn't done before. But it is so important to have that intent. And in fact, now 8 years after the effect of establishing this organization, which now is global, in fact, I'm doing every single one of those 5 things. And I think if I hadn't had to be so resolute, and certainly web designers say to you, so what do you do? And be clear. It was a very good exercise for me.
Yeah. So you made the shift, you started your own business, you created the logo, the website. Then what? Did people start contacting you? Were they knocking down your door? What was the experience like for you? And how did you get your first few clients?
Well, I made a philosophy for myself. And the philosophy, I think you might laugh, but it still is one that is present. I actually said, I'm going to work for clients or organizations that I love, on topics that I love, with people that I love. What I was trying to say is that in my second chapter, what I really wanted to have the autonomy is not to be a slave to the work, but in a very clear way, choose what I was going to do. And very much of a sense that time is the most precious thing that you have. So you really need to be very methodical about where you're going to do that. Having done that, quite frankly, I was just very strategic about it. Within Accenture, what I had agreed with them is that given that I was establishing a new organization in the field of diversity, which they sponsor, that I could approach organizations that I had been working with for 25 years at Accenture. And as a result, they knew me, they knew the brand behind me, and they were actually my first clients. The other thing that I realized is you talk about the sort of methodology. I really wanted, when I did diversity, equity, inclusion, that it wasn't a checklist. It wasn't just general soft stuff. I really wanted to do the why, the what, and the how, and create a methodology. And for that, I decided that I'd like to collaborate with INSEAD, a business school. Because what was important for me is to really have the robustness of research, that you could talk about diversity and performance. And then thereafter, and perhaps the most important, I developed a certification for leaders worldwide, which was vetted by INSEAD. And that really just gave me sort of a highway in terms of work.
Yeah. So I'd love to know, tell me more about the certification. I mean, what does that model look like? Is that, the business model behind it? Who typically pays for that? How do they go through it? Is it specifically through INSEAD or some other, your business directly? Just tell me more about what that looks like.
So what I was seeing in terms of this whole domain of diversity, and if you don't mind me making a little bit of an inflection, I think you'll have seen all the research that even in the States, 8 billion spent per year on diversity. And when you actually look what is happening with the investments, the research will say that maybe as much as 70 to 90% is wasted. Why is it wasted? Because there's a sort of knee-jerk reaction. Let's look what others are doing. We don't contextualize it. We don't actually even look at it in a robust way. And so with that context in mind, I said there are leaders, chairs, board of directors, CEOs, their presidents, etc., who actually understand that they're going to need to navigate it and lead it, but who are not confident. Diversity is one of the top 10 words that make us really anxious because we don't know what we're doing actually with it. And so what I wanted to do with the certification is really actually take leaders through what I've written now in the book in terms of, so why are stakeholders asking for it? Why is it becoming a necessity? What do we mean? And what elements need to be present for performance? And what capabilities are going to have to be there? And so the certification was actually focused on organizations, leaders, but also the ambassadors around diversity about these three big questions. And that's been really wonderful to do.
And where do people go through the certification? Is it an online certification? Is it part of the business school? Just what does that structure look like?
Well, it used to be given through a delivery model in Abu Dhabi and Singapore and Boston and London, et cetera, et cetera. With COVID, we went virtual. And I have to say, while there is some online learning or reflection work, what you find is that the big learning occurs from the dialogue and dialogue actually with other leaders. So something like 10 certifications are given per year, and leaders from around the world, from different organizations, government, commercial, not-for-profit, take place, and we start talking about this and having the dialogue. And indeed, what I did is to ensure that so many diversity certifications actually create unconscious bias and have issues. So I just really made use of INSEAD to validate and support that it was high quality.
So it sounds like when you launched your business, you had the benefit of being able to leverage the relationships that you had built over many years with the buyers and clients of Accenture that you were working with and serving at that time. Was that quite common for somebody to be able to leave Accenture, go off and still tap into the past clients that they were serving as part of Accenture? Or was this a very unique structure or situation?
What I would say that when people leave, and here I was, I think, just reflective and strategic. I mean, I got that having been a partner and being with Accenture for 25 years, that there would be a problem if I went to a competitor. However, when you actually come in discussion and dialogue, and you started talking about what is important to each of us, we could find an overlap, which was a beneficial place. So when it was clear to Accenture that I didn't want to go ahead in terms of competition, that actually I wanted to focus. And given that I confirmed with Accenture that as an EDI partner and a well-known one, this is something that they should also wish to be sponsoring, that we could find a way. I think this is not normal if you go in a confrontational side. And that wasn't my intention. It wasn't going to help any of us to do that. And I wanted to carry on work, and I wanted to respect, obviously, the IP, etc., of Accenture.
Yeah.
What I will say, it's very interesting, is that over the 8 years, I have retained and changed my operating model. I have what I call the third, and the third. I have a third, clients that are commercial clients. They pay commercial prices and say the normal Accenture type clients, the Fortune 500.
Sure.
Then I have actually organizations which are institutions. I do, for example, work for the ministries of defense and justice and terrorism, and all these government institutions from various countries. They tend to have really rates within government. And so I do a third because I think they're a very important stakeholder. And then I do a third, which is what I call goodwill. And actually, I would advise any entrepreneurs who are starting organizations to never miss that category, because that category is the category where I innovate, where, in fact, it keeps my energy and what is possible. And with organizations that are not typical and yet are pioneers and innovators, and I usually do it as a goodwill.
While we work with a lot of seasoned and experienced consultants here at Consulting Success, I'm often contacted by new early-stage consultants. Invariably, the question I'm asked is, what are the steps I should take to become a successful consultant and grow my consulting business to my first 6 figures per year? Well, I'm excited to announce that we've opened the doors for our Momentum program. This is our most popular program for early-stage consultants, and it has helped almost 1,000 consultants to start, run, and grow successful consulting businesses. It gives you the step-by-step plan to help you with your messaging, your fees, and pricing strategies, how to win more proposals, how to go to market more effectively, developing a marketing system to generate leads consistently, and so much more. And right now, until September the 19th, you can sign up for Momentum and get 50% off the regular price by going to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO. Only 100 spots are available to join Momentum and get 50% off. This deal is only available until September the 19th or until all 100 spots are gone. We won't be opening up new spots in this program for several months, so don't wait. Go to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO. So I have a question for you on the goodwill I'd love to explore. But before doing that, it's interesting when you're mentioning about the transition from being at Accenture to still tapping into some of those relationships that you had while you were there and not being confrontational, because in the research that we've done on a couple of different studies, we found that over 50% of consultants, their first client is actually a previous employer. And so maintaining that relationship is so important. When you did that, even though you were now running your own business, but the connections or first clients were coming through clients of Accenture that used to be your clients when you worked at Accenture, was that structured as part of an Accenture project? Like, was Accenture monetizing that or benefiting from that in any way monetarily, or was this completely separate?
It was completely separate.
Okay.
And I don't think it needed to be, but I think there will be many people who can relate to the sense, especially if you've been with an organization for 25 years, that you wanted a different context.
Right.
And what I didn't want to do is suddenly have one foot in and one foot out and still do what I really wanted to pioneer and have the space to create something new. So this is why I took more distance. I leveraged the client relationships, but I was very methodical and focused on creating a new space for myself.
Was there any concern at all from Accenture? Was it raised in conversation that, well, okay, if this, client X, you begin working with them on diversity and inclusion, that's going to, take 6 figures away from their budget. And that means that we may not be able to earn that money. So essentially, they might have to reallocate some of the resources they're putting towards this other work that we're doing as part of Accenture. Was there any concern at all about that, or did that not even come up?
It didn't come up. And I think, as you'll know, Accenture does like 100 millions, sometimes billion, big transformation, industry spins, etc. What I'm doing would probably be like drops in the ocean.
Right.
It is very specialized. It's very focused. It's a different type I think, just as impactful.
Sure.
But it's a different type of transaction, a different type of scale.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that, because I think I'm always trying to consider what our community and listeners would want to be asking you as I'm engaging in this conversation with you. So I appreciate you kind of sharing that. You mentioned about the goodwill, and I wonder, to me that sounds like such an important focus as a way to give back, to make an impact, to be creative in a different way, as you said, and to be innovative. Do you think that your mindset around that is because you're at a place career-wise or financially that allows you to have that space where you're quote unquote kind of giving up a third of your time to invest into that? Or would you advise that even somebody early on in their career be open to doing projects that they may not be able to monetize at the full market rate or even beyond, like at a premium rate, but the benefits are so great of doing that kind of work?
So it's a very good question. This was never the reason why I got into this work, but there is this incredible synergy between, these three pieces that I talk about. What you'll find, especially in the goodwill side, whether it's an NGO, not-for-profit, or say a university where you're working directly with the students or so, is somehow there's been this incredible cross-pollination back into the commercial work and the institution. In many ways, we're quite a small group of people. So I'm astonished at how much of my work in the commercial side has indirectly come from the goodwill side. Once again, it wasn't the reason I did it,
right?
But it seems to happen. The second thing is that a lot of my work, to be credible and to be repeatable, needs to be proven. That you can really say, I have this methodology and it has occurred. And so very much the NGO, the goodwill work, but the agreement is that they are going to support me proving. So I will assist them guiding their diversity journey. We'll have a hypothesis about the various capabilities that have to be built, and we're going to baseline and we're going to evaluate, which allows me once again to go back. And then perhaps maybe the most important, as you will know as a consultant, is what's really important to be a strategic value add consultant is that you've got the experience and the know-how and the stories, and you're able to adjudicate what will work or not. So it really gives me the bedrock of that experience that I can relate to and take into my research and my methodology. So, it's a very positive, it's a reinforcing circle. And I'm very pleased about how it's worked.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I'm a very big believer in the idea of, taking action or being out there. And I see this in some ways as being similar to the concept of networking, and not networking where you go to an event and everyone's just trying to, pass out their business cards and sell each other, but more with the idea of you go someplace and you never know who you're going to meet. You put yourself out there, you take action. And so here you're doing this work. The intention is not for it to necessarily turn into business, but it just so happens that as you're serving, providing value, making an impact, you're meeting new people, you're like things are moving, and that ends up then getting you back to greater business creation and value creation. So that's fantastic. So, Kay, you started off in your business with really leveraging those relationships. Sounds like you didn't have to do a lot of quote unquote marketing. Maybe you reactivated your network, you engaged with the people that you already had relationships with. Now, fast forward many years later, have you had to do any marketing? And if so, what kind of marketing have you found to be most effective in creating conversations with ideal clients?
Michael, I do a very little marketing. And because the marketing that I have done has not converted really to relationships. And the reason that I say it is that when you're talking about talent, when you're talking about a subject like how do you navigate, what is the strategic narrative, etc., you're not going to do that with someone that you don't know. You might do it for an organization like a big brand, but in terms of the organization, albeit it's now become large, my organization, certainly you're not going to say, you want to know Care and you want to know their affiliates. So what I really have the focus is that every single project, engagement, program has to be fantastic because the word of mouth is the marketing. What you'll see is that I would say 90%, well, most of my organizations are now 8-year organizations that I've done work year on year as they've traversed into different directions. But my new clients have all come from word of mouth.
Mm.
And if you have to talk about marketing, I would say, and it wasn't done with this express purpose, but I see the book Beyond D&I really as probably marketing, because people are reading it, they're reaching out. And I wrote the book because it was 35 years of experience that I really wanted to capture. But what I do see is that it does open doors because people are interested in having the conversation.
Are you finding that, are you doing anything proactive with the book in terms of marketing? Are you sending it to people with a letter, or is it just kind of selling and it's passive? How are you approaching the actual, using the book for marketing purposes?
So, Michael, I sit in the Netherlands and doing some research about books. What you'll see is that the big market is the United States, and the second market is the UK. And then things sort of through percolation go to other areas. So for me, what was very clear is that there needed to be traction in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is how to do that. And here I was very focused on the PR. You may know the PR agency Fortier PR, who represents some of the key leadership books. And what I did is reach out and said, would you do the PR? And they have done amazing things with it, which I couldn't have done. So, I often say that this book feels a little bit like, well, I'm a mother of 3 children, my 4th child. And what do you do with a child? You invest in them.
Yeah.
It's not a flash in the pan. It's year after year after year. So currently we're taking the book to the deans and program directors of all business schools that are offering master's and bachelor courses in EDI. We're going to all Fortune 500 organizations as well as, and you simply need a partner to do that for you.
Right. When you mentioned the universities, it's interesting because when I was going through the book, it has a lot of data, a lot of footnotes. I mean, it reminds me in some ways of a textbook. And I want to ask you why that structure. Why did you choose to write it in that form as opposed to, some other kind of format?
What I have missed desperately in the whole dialogue around diversity is the concept of efficacy. Efficacy is that when you make the investment, there is an outcome. And in fact, if you ask any leader, how much do you invest in diversity and what is the return on your investment spend in diversity? I can say less than 1% of leaders will give an answer either on the investment or the on return. And yet there has been this incredible research in terms of that. Let me give you an example. 75% of unconscious bias interventions, workshops, etc., in fact, have no impact after a week. And some even raise bias within the organization. And yet, Professor Moskrakison did amazing research about which interventions actually work and drive behavior. And so what I wanted to do was marry my practice of 50 organizations and even more in diversity with the efficacy, the academic, robust scholarly research. And you're right, this book can be a textbook. And this is why we do certifications around it, because it's not, the first chapter is a summary of the whole book. But for those who really want to go through and use it as a handbook, you need to go through a process of certification.
Right. You mentioned that your company now is global. You've done certifications globally. What does the structure of your business look like? Because you said one of the reasons why you wanted to make that transition from, working in a very large consultancy to running your own business was to do things your own way, keep things smaller. Kind of give us a sense of, is there a team around you? How do you, I know you use this PR agency, but what does a team look like currently? And how are you able to operate globally and provide what you're able to provide?
When I was looking at the operating model of diversity and performance, I zeroed on an organization that I've actually got a great deal of respect And I think you'll see some of the parallels of what I'm doing and what they've done. And the book Organization was built around a person, Richard Barrett, who wrote a book, Value-Based Organizations. And what I really loved about that organization, it's got more than 2,000 clients worldwide, but the head office, the hub of it is very small, just 8 people. They've got a lot of tooling, but what they do is they certify people. And the certified people start executing the delivery of the methods and the process. And on top of these people who have been certified are the certifiers of the certified. So, and that is the approach that I have. So I have an organization, which is a core organization, which has got the expertise, the technical stuff, etc. I have a number of people worldwide who are certified and have done this work with me for a very, very long time, and in different regions can certify others. And what occurs is the people who are then doing this work within the organizations are making reference to the book. They're making use of the tooling, for example, the capability gap analysis, the identification of the stage of diversity that you're on. And so that's how it is. It's what I would call an affiliate model. What I didn't want to have is a lot of people on the payroll.
Right.
I wish to have very experienced people who could make it happen in the regions.
Yeah. And so have you found that over the years and especially today, like, are you spending the majority of your time overseeing the business and thinking about strategy and team, not team in the sense of people on the payroll, but all the certifications? Or are you still spending a lot of your time in the actual delivery itself, working with clients directly? Like, how are you spending your time given this operating model?
Probably, I hadn't really thought about it, but probably it's also a third. You know, my credibility is being in the trenches. My credibility is sitting down and talking with a leadership team and saying, where are you? What have you done? What are the problems? You know, clearly at the point where you're doing some baselining and you're making use of the tools and everything that others can do. But what I'm very interested then is in the result. And so how do you close the gap? And I suppose it's a little bit like my role at Accenture. You plunge in where you need to, you keep an overview, and you ensure that there is innovation. So, yeah.
That's where you're spending your time. When you think about the current model that you have, is there anything that you're paying attention to as a way to grow it or optimize it, or, you know, look at increasing profitability? Like, is there anything that you've learned? If there's somebody else who's listening right now thinking to themselves, this model of certifications sounds like it could actually be a really great one for me as well in my business, any advice that you would offer them to things to just be careful around or best practices?
So, you know, during the delivery of all these certifications, what many people were saying to me, and where a lot of my time was gone, is to say, wow, okay, this was so rich in terms of content, but I didn't quite get this, or could you confirm this? This is where I was spending a lot of time. And this is why this book was so important, because what you can do is, for anyone who's attending the certification, give a handbook. And you obviously, during the certification, discuss it and everything, but it's a point for them.
Right. Yeah.
The second thing that I've really done is in terms of the tooling. So if you do a gap analysis for an organization in terms of which stage of diversity are they, where do they need to go to, what is the state of their capabilities? Look, you can do this manually or you can do it just online. And so all the tooling that you can give to the organization that they can update, and where your time is then used to say, look, this is what's striking me and everything. And more than that, actually organizations want that. And then maybe the last thing that is important is, I'm a great believer of developing internal capability with an organization. I think it's absolutely critical. So I have spent a lot of time equipping an organization to be taking it forward themselves. And I think that is probably a success factor of my organization, because people are keeping up the network and the contact, not because they can't do it themselves, but they want to go to the next level of performance.
Yeah, those are great advice. The part of kind of capturing feedback, it's an area that we've been very focused on in our coaching and training programs, because you'll put something out, and getting the actual feedback from the client as to what they love or what they'd like a little bit more detail on is so important as a way to kind of provide continuous improvement. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that. Okay, before we wrap up, I have a few other quick questions for you. One is, if you kind of look at your performance, your focus, just how you're able to get a lot done, are there one or two things that you do on a daily basis that you would consider almost habits that lead to your productivity or performance or just the success that you've been able to create over the long term?
There's a wonderful Dutch expression that I learned when I moved there. Don't postpone that which can be done today. I am a big strategist. I love implementation. I don't like admin. And I used to postpone it or delay it or whatever. Now I just do it, and I do it efficiently.
Yeah.
So that's really important, because if you don't have the basics right in your organization, if you're not turning around proposals, if you're not invoicing, if you're not getting this, you are just draining your organization. And so I try to do that highly efficiently, under 10%. And that is simply by automating and make it clear. The second thing that I think is very important is, whenever I see that I'm becoming a little bit dull because I'm doing too much repetition or so, I'm very strict with myself to change it, because any work is about passion and energy and convincing the client they've got the right person. Mm-hmm. So you can't afford to be dull. So what I really try to do is have a portfolio of work, which keeps me quite agile. And the last thing that I would say is, you need good people, not specifically on your payroll. It can be the affiliate model, but you need people who speak your language. So what I did is, because I am in an affiliate model, I work with hundreds of people who actually have their companies, but work through my company. Mm-hmm. But in order to have the same language, they all have to be certified. So they're not allowed to touch a client without having that certification, right, which gives you a confidence. So I think those are some things that I do.
Great. And then two other quick questions then before wrapping up. In the last 6 months or so, what is the best book that you have read or listened to? It can be fiction or nonfiction.
Well, I've got so many of these. I have to say that I've been reading again Blue Ocean Strategy. It's by, obviously, two professors from INSEAD. And I was quite intrigued how they extend their book into courses, into short books. So I actually just love the process, how this book grew.
That's a great example. And then finally, Kay, I want to thank you so much for coming on here today and sharing some of your story and your journey and best practices with us. Where should people go to learn more about you and your work?
So they can either make contact with me at k@diversityandperformance.com, diversity written out full. And for the book, they can go to beyonddiversityandinclusion.com, and they see all the methodology and the certifications and everything. So beyonddiversityandinclusion written out full.com.
All right. We'll have all that linked up in the show notes. Kay, thank you again so much.
I love speaking to you. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. For more episodes and to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, head on over to iTunes. And if you'd like to develop consistent lead flow and a highly profitable consulting business, learn more about our coaching programs at consultingsuccess.com.